Hello and welcome to my session at this 2020 Vision One Love, One Heart, One Vision of Outreach virtual conference hosted by Pregnancy Help Australia. The first thing I want to do is to say a huge thank you to the organisers of this virtual conference. Sometimes organising a conference on the ground is hard enough, but to organise a virtual conference has its own problems as well. Without further ado, let's launch in. The title of this session is Gender 101, Journeying with Others. And my name is James Parker, and I run an informal group called True Identity International. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as well. So who am I, and what does True Identity International actually do? You can tell from the accent that I'm from Britain. I've got my cup of tea here, my liquid refreshment, and I came to Australia in the year 2013. Now, my mother's pregnancy was a rather different one. She basically gave birth to twins. Yes, I have a twin sister. My sister's very much the prettier half. She gave birth early to twins, so we were 2 months premature. My twin and I were then left by our mother there at birth. We were incubated for 3 months, fostered for 3 months, then placed in an orphanage before being adopted into a family. So I was raised by a mum and a dad with 3 older brothers and sisters, along with my twin sister. During my childhood, I experienced extensive childhood sexual abuse. And this led to me having multiple addictions by the time I hit my teenage years. At the age of 17, I came out, and at 18, I basically entered frontline gay activism in London itself. I ended up in a long-term gay relationship, and it was there that I actually turned and made my decision to follow the person of Jesus Christ. This led to me leaving the LGBT community and entering into a crazy journey of recovery. Today, I am father to an 11-year-old daughter. I got married in the year 2006, and today I'm absolutely passionate about godly restoration of men and women. It's a little bit about me. What does True Identity International do? Well, as I say, we're an informal peer support network, and we reach out to victims and survivors of childhood sexual abuse, to men and women struggling with porn addiction, to those who are same-sex attracted. In many cases, we help people to come out rather than to hide what they're feeling, but to be really honest about where their lives are at. That's done in one-on-one work, it's done in group support, and particularly offering support that's not being offered by the LGBTQ community. So I meet with many people who are rejecting the LGBTQ lifestyle and who want just a sense of hope and some inner restoration within themselves. We also deal with people who are questioning their gender, or those who've transitioned and are now detransitioning back to their own biological identity. And overall, we're about upholding the beauty, the dignity, the radiance, the majesty of what it means to be male or to be female. So this session, what's a quick description of it? Basically, we're looking at the fact that gender is now everywhere, especially in the minds of young people who are most likely to be getting pregnant or trying not to get pregnant, or are going to be considering pregnancy in the coming years. So it's best that we're prepared. We do have a choice. We can bury our heads in the sand, or we can decide to meet other people where they're at. So this session is going to explore some of the ways to deal with what it's like, what's likely to land on your own doorstep if you're dealing with pregnancies. So let's take the bull by the horns today and look at how we might walk alongside others and the topic of gender in a pregnancy situation. Quick overview of the session. We're looking at some new pregnancies, human rights, how would you greet people, what would you do regarding pronouns, and considering what it means to interact with people who see themselves as non-binary or as gender non-conforming people. We'll do a quick look at a pastoral approach at the end, a few resources, and then hopefully you'll get me live for some Q&A. So let's dive in. New pregnancies. Well, since the passing of the legislation for same-sex marriage, now we're seeing more and more same-sex couples, 2 men, 2 women, who are wanting to have children. Certainly where I live in Western Australia, there's a big push by the government to say to all the same-sex couples, same-sex male couples in particular, and to single men, you too can have your family because we do not discriminate against anybody. That means that the adult's rights clearly are being put before the child's rights. And I know what it's like to be ripped away from a mother at birth. And let me assure you, it's very, very painful indeed. Maybe not at the time, but that pain comes back and haunts you later on in life. So you may be being presented with surrogates who are turning up to your doorstep talking about their pregnancies. Other new pregnancies are among transgender couples. So it could well be that somebody might turn up at your door. One person looks female, one person looks male, but it could be the person with the beard and the flat chest that is actually the person who is pregnant as well. This is just a story of one transgender couple who hadn't actually intended, I don't think, to have a child, not to begin with, but then it took 6 years for them to get pregnant. And certainly the woman who transitioned to become a man says that he now finally feels complete. Clearly, we think carefully about the child as well. Will the child feel complete? That's a question that might rise later on. There's another story here. There are many, many stories like this out there on the internet as well. This is about Caden Coleman, 29-year-old from Florida, who transitioned from female to male almost a decade ago, started gaining weight, had a bloated stomach, and put it down to a lack of exercise. I can relate to that. He'd been taking testosterone doses for 5 years and then fell pregnant at a time when he was preparing for a mastectomy because he had to go for a period of time without testosterone. And so in that time, got pregnant. The couple said they couldn't be happier now to have this baby, Azalea. And Azalea calls one person daddy and the other Poppy. And they believe that really deep down, as long as she's loved and cared for, that she won't really care about having two fathers. I can assure you that there might well be problems and difficulties in years to come. Of course, this is all shrouded in human rights and how we deal with human rights. Now, here in Australia, human rights are recognised as the inherent value of each person, regardless of background, where we live, what we look like, what we think, or what we believe. They're based on principles of dignity, equality, and mutual respect. And I put those words in bold very deliberately. These are shared across cultures, religions, philosophies, and are about being treated fairly, treating others fairly, and having the ability to make genuine choices in our day-to-day lives. And this is about respect for human rights as the cornerstone of us having strong communities in which everyone can make a contribution and feel included. And that comes from the government's human rights website itself. Now, nobody likes being called bigoted, a hater, or exclusive, phobic, or intolerant. And therefore, we've got to be very careful that in a pregnancy situation, you don't end up with these words being thrown in your direction. Otherwise, you have the potential of being reported to the Australian Human Rights Commission. Now, it could also mean that you end up being set up, and we do know that there are people out there who are deliberately trying to set up good organizations, good upright organizations. But if they slightly veer away from what the gender non-conforming or the LGBT person thinks or believes, then what happens is that people and places are being set up now with a flag being waved saying they discriminate, they're bigoted, hate-filled, exclusive, phobic, and intolerant. So I'm really conscious that you don't want to have landing on your doorstep the possibility of legal fees needing to be found, potential of fines from a court, and even the possibility of closure. So it's important that we keep the focus at all times on the child. That's what the pregnancy is all about. And I believe that this calls for us to act like the Good Samaritan, or to certainly to operate as in the situations where the Samaritans appear in the Gospels. We see two situations there. We see one where there's the woman at the well, and Jesus goes to meet her with where she's at. Basically, he says to her, what do you need? He knows that she's thirsty. She's at the well. Then he says, I am that thirst. Then there's the story of the Good Samaritan, where a man is, he's bashed up by some form of brigand and he's left there bleeding on the side of the road. And the Good Samaritan comes along and says, what are the needs? This man needs to be cared for. He needs to be put into a place where he can rest. I need to pay for this and make sure that he's being helped. And therefore, this is reaching out, ignoring what we think, and looking to the needs of other people. Now, some of you may not be aware of this, but there is a big push for us to change the way in which we speak. Now, I'm not saying whether you should or should not agree with this. I'm just talking about the situations that you'll be presented with and how to journey alongside others. That is the theme of this session itself. So where normally we might say ladies and gentlemen, There's recommendations of saying distinguished guests. You could have somebody turning up at your door and you don't know whether or not they're male or whether they're female. So rather than saying, oh, hey guys, welcome, come in, you might want to say, hey folks, good to see you. Welcome to our place. In you come, let's have a chat. Rather than referring to men and women, we refer to everyone. We turn around and say, you know, well, everyone needs the opportunity to be supported in their pregnancy, rather than saying, you know, oh, well, women need the support in their pregnancy. Oh, and then men folk too, as well. When referring to somebody who may be there with you in the room, you could say, you know, oh, well, there's the lady outside who's wearing the red top, you know, she's just come in, she's in the second trimester. But you might want to say, you might have seen somebody outside in the waiting area with a red top on. They're in their second trimester. And rather than saying, oh, does that belong to him or does that belong to her? You might want to say, oh, is that theirs? Does that belong to the person in the red top? Whatever it might be. Now, you might think some of these things are quite crazy, but this is where we're at. And it's important we journey alongside others. Of course, another area that's been rising recently is the whole area of pronouns. Now, I know many people over in Europe who now receive work emails, and at the bottom, they have to put down what their preferred pronouns are. Now, the ones highlighted in red on the screen here are the ones that you'll be used to. He, him, his, himself, she, her, hers, herself, they, them, their, themselves. Now, you're not going to be expected to know all these pronouns or to remember these pronouns. I'm just asking that we would be incredibly sensitive in the midst of somebody's pregnancy to what pronouns they might wish to use. Now, remember, the focus is always on the person being at peace in such a way that the well-being of that child in the womb is being preserved. So what would you do regarding pronouns? Well, let me give you a little bit of a way to help you through this. I say, always remember the word SCAR. Be sensitive, be compassionate, and be respectful. Be sensitive to somebody else's situation. Spoken words are very, very powerful. And you might find it difficult turning around to somebody that you know was born with XX chromosomes and calling them a he. But spoken words are powerful. You don't upset someone, and you certainly don't want a legal case against the pregnancy centre itself. But I want to say this to you, and this is what I notice in my day-to-day work, is the gaze of your eyes, as I'm looking at the screen now, is very, very powerful upon people. That sense of attention can make them feel connected. It can make them feel wanted. It can build up a sense of trust. Then there's also the way we treat somebody. So if we're affirming of that person, oh my goodness, how exciting for you to be pregnant. Are you doing okay? How are things going with this? That real sense of just affirmation of that person also builds trust. And then also appropriate affection is also very important as well. But the inner interaction of the soul makes all the difference. And actually, unspoken words, we find at True Identity International, are even more powerful sometimes than spoken words themselves. So when you have a person or a couple before you, and you're helping them through with their pregnancy or with the situation around pregnancy, just the gaze of your eyes and the joy that you find in the person or people sat in front of you can make a huge difference to begin to build trust within these people. And just asking also that you just stay calm and that you just be very, very aware as well of what's happening to the people's situation too as well. Now, your small deal, so it might seem like a very small thing to you, could be a very, very big deal to other people. And this gets magnified, of course, during pregnancy, because people end up being incredibly, incredibly sensitive during pregnancy as well. So this is about building long-term relationships with the people in front of you. Now, then we come to a gender master list. Now, there's only 58 I put on here, with the last two being him and her. And I worked out recently that actually there's now a list of 1,417 different genders that people can choose from. And this is why it's important that we're sensitive with other people, that we welcome them as individuals in their own right, offering them respect, compassion, and dealing with sensitivity. That's the word SCAR there for you again. So how would you interact with non-binary? That's people who don't identify as male or female, or with gender non-conforming people, what they might also call queer. Now, gender non-conforming people can be cisgender. That means that their biology and their feelings align. That means they're female, I'm female and I feel female, or I'm male and I feel female. They could be non-binary or genderqueer, and they identify as neither male or female, but as another gender of their own choosing. And that's the previous list we just saw. They could be binary transgender. So they're living within the male-female spectrum, but their biology is opposite to how they see and feel about themselves. Now, these people have often undergone a greater challenge than most people to actually achieve pregnancy itself. And they could be in shock, as one of the previous examples was about Caden, was in shock to suddenly find out that she/he was suddenly pregnant. So they're often dealing with lots of very, very difficult things. And in some cases, more often than not, they're surrounded by less stability and less support from family. So it's very, very important that we're focusing on the child as well as on the parents here as well, but that we offer some stability and support. Now, the challenge becomes this for many people who are gender non-conforming, is that they end up having further difficulties down the line. And I'm going to be blunt with you, and I deal with this every day, is when we ignore God's design or the design that's been around for millennia, then what happens is we can expect difficulties afterwards. Here on this slide, I've just put a quick overview of human development. And certainly this is in accordance with Erik Erikson and with Jean Piaget, if any of you have studied education as well. So between the ages of 0 and 2, mum is imperative. Having the feminine there, that tender, caring feminine. And mum gives a deep sense of well-being. And the child says, can I trust the world? Can I trust the world? And mum says, yes, you can. Because who you are is good, just because of who you are. And she, along with dad, are examples of agape love, which is God's unconditional love. You're good and you're loved just for who you are. Between the ages of about 2 and 4, then both mum and dad become really important, because it's important that that child has the opportunity to realize there's XX chromosomes and XY chromosomes, and they've got to choose from one or the other. Which one am I? Which one do I most identify with? And this is about them finding their true sex identity. And they begin to ask the question, is it okay for me to be me? And this is where that second type of love begins to grow. The Greeks had these 4 words for love. The second type of love, storge, which is a sort of a parental love, but a boundaried love. There's, boundaries in which we operate. There's boundaries to my body. There's boundaries in the world around me. There's boundaries everywhere. Between the ages of 4 and 5, the family becomes important. And rather than the well-being of a child now being the focal point, it's the welfare of the child. And the child asks the question, is it okay for me to do things, to move about, to act, to be my own persona? They're beginning to discover themselves. Children are at this age itself. Between 6 and 12, neighbors become important. School becomes really, really important. And the child begins to say, can I make it in the world of people and things? And this is where friendship love, filial love comes in, and especially the love between the 2 sexes. And this is why the Safe Schools program is very dangerous, because it tries to tell children in primary school that just because they have a deep affection for someone of the same sex, they must be gay or lesbian. That is so not true. That basically is trying to harm the healthy development and sex identity development of a child. And then from puberty onwards, up to about the age of 18 or 19, peers become really important, and their role models become important. And dad especially is the one that begins to form that child in knowing whether she's going to be a woman of dignity or he's going to be a man of majesty, and have dignity towards women. And the question that a teen would be asking themselves is, who am I and who can I be? And of course, at puberty, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone kick into place. And this is where the real creative side of a person should come forth, and the opportunity for romantic love, and therefore to become fruitful. Yes, fruitful at work, fruitful in all areas of life, but particularly procreatively fruitful within the boundaries of marriage itself, which of course we know to be the ideal. But when the ideal doesn't happen, then we expect difficulties. And we see difficulties in the children when they're born premature. We may see that babies will have sleeping difficulties if they don't have a stable mum and dad at home. They may end up having behavioral challenges, or they may have abnormal relational tensions, or there could be a sudden relationship breakdown within the parents themselves, whether we see two dads, two mums, mum and dad, whatever it might be. And of course, you may know of other issues that could rise. But these are the things that I'm seeing and dealing with on a day-to-day basis at True Identity International, particularly a number of same-sex couples that have gone ahead and entered into pregnancies or to have children, and then suddenly within a short space of time, the tension is too much and the relationship can begin to break down. So it's important in dealing with pregnancy that we always think pastorally. A pastoral approach is really important. And I want to just share with you 10 different points to bear in mind when dealing with people coming forward in this whole area of pregnancy. The first is show delight in the other person. Hello, nice to meet you, good to see you, hope you're well, really good to know you, etc. The second most important thing as well is to become the student of the person in front of you. It's very, very likely that in every situation of pregnancy that there is something that you can learn from this other person. So don't be frightened to humble yourself and to become their student. The third area is that we stop speaking carelessly. And that's why I talked earlier on about some of the vocabulary that we would use. It's important that to begin with, we meet people with sensitivity and also with respect towards them. We've also got to resign, I put here, from being God's moral cop. If you're not careful, you end up through your eyes or through your lack of gaze or your body, your demeanor of your body, is you turn around and you become judgmental of other people. We're not out to judge people in the pregnancy game, certainly not. We are to offer empathy and we're to offer people mercy where they most need it. It's important, therefore, that we begin to refresh our understanding of love. Now, I'm a Christian and you may not be a Christian, but we know that the golden rule of all the religions is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you would want somebody to be understanding, empathetic, and merciful towards you. Point number 7, swap fear-based relating for a heart-focused connection. Connect with the uniqueness of this person in front of you. Often we've no idea what their story is. Often some people don't know their entire life story themselves. It might be very much repressed. That was true for me for many years. So we're sensitive towards other people. It's important to be different. Don't be frightened of being different. This doesn't mean to say that you're not being true to yourself. It just means you've got a different situation, and it therefore means responding differently to that situation. And be courageous. Don't be frightened of showing compassion. That word compassion comes from compassione, which means to be with suffering. So it's suffering with other people and also offering them unconditional love, which is what the word grace means. Now, this doesn't mean that you're not true to yourself within these suggested guidelines. I'm not asking that you totally abandon your own values and your own virtues, but that you go with those same values and virtues alongside the lives of other people. And that's why this is called journeying with others. We walk alongside them. So when you're dealing with the whole issue of gender, particularly in the area of pregnancy, I just want to warn you, please expect the unexpected. All I can say is this people in the rainbow family, or what they might say is in the queer family, their childhoods have often been very, very difficult. And if their childhood hasn't been difficult, then their teenage years have been difficult. I know certainly a number of lesbian couples who've had children, and what happens is the women have been married to a man previously, and they've got such terrible stories of how they've been treated by these men that there's no way that they can continue a marriage with a man. And so they've left that marriage, and now their emotional needs are being met by a woman. So sometimes we have no idea what a person's history might be. This is why we must be sensitive to people. Now, for some people, pregnancy, and particularly from the rainbow or queer community, is another chance for them to care for a child. And in some cases, they're trying to care for their own inner child that never felt cared for. And they want the opportunity, therefore, to do a better job of what they think their parent or their parents did previously. And so their focus is on the well-being of this child. Now, if you are presented with a non-gender conforming pregnancy, This is also a rare opportunity and a chance to begin to help build stability and commitment within the lives of those who present themselves for pregnancy. And your life can have a very strong effect on the lives of others. You might be a person that's not just there for pregnancy, but in years to come, with that relationship of trust is really built up. And I want to say this to you, never assume anything about some of the relationships and the couples or even the single people that might present themselves to you. I know certainly of a case of two women who lived together for a couple of decades. They had a couple of kids. One of them was very much church going, and then the relationship split. And the mother of the two children actually then entered into a relationship with another man after 2 decades of being with a woman. So often we've no idea what might be around the corner. And it's not for us to judge people on that, as I say, to be the God's moral cop in any way whatsoever. All we are is we're there to offer support and love, lots of good attention, lots of affirmation, lots of healthy affection. And above all, it's important that we don't become the problem for that person in their pregnancy, but that we are a part of the solution. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Our focus is on that baby and what's best for baby. I'm coming into land now, so I always say to people, do up your seatbelts, because that's, I'm just about to finish here. There's some very helpful resources here. 2 of them relate to children themselves and how they deal with having been raised by same-sex parents or by transgender parents or non-binary parenting. If you want to understand the whole world of transgenderism, then one of the best books I can recommend for you at this stage is a book by Ryan Anderson called When Harry Became Sally. And those of you involved in pregnancy and certainly anything linked to adoption will already probably know, I think, about a book by Nancy Newton-Verrier called The Primal Wound. That's a very, very helpful book for any child that in any way has been taken away from its father and mother. Great book, that to say the least. Now, if you want to know about other stories of people who have left the LGBT lifestyle, then there are 4 websites here that I'd just like to bring to your attention. One is called sexchangeregret.com, and that's in relation to stories of people who've left behind transgenderism and are now detransitioning. For those who've left the lesbian lifestyle, gay lifestyle, or bisexual lifestyle, there are 3 wonderful websites there, twoprisons.com, truelove.is, and changemovement.com. There's also another new one that's been created here in Australia called freetochange.org. That's one word, freetochange.org. And that has been a research program of all the different people who've left the LGBT lifestyle as well. And the Change Movement have got a great book out there, although many of their stories are on their website at changemovement.com. If you want to take a look at some written articles that I've done, then there's a number at a place called the Catholic Weekly online, at MacArthurNet, at FamilyLifeInternational.org, that's FLI.org, in the Spectator, and also Cauldron Pool. There's also a number of YouTube videos out there of me speaking as well. And if you want to get in touch at True Identity International, then there's the email address on the bottom for you, trueidentityintl@gmail.com. So I'm going to finish this video broadcast here now, and hopefully just open up to any questions that you might have, and hopefully meet you there online. And maybe we might even get some, we might just get some answers as well. So thank you for joining me here on this video. Let's head into questions and answers.